Hello, welcome back. It is a new day, a new sleigh, and a new video where I have something to say. Now, I had something to say on Sunday. Today is Tuesday. So I did have something to say, and I said it, and I thought everything went fine when I finished recording and I wrapped up my cute little session, only to find out that the microphone was not connected for the full 2 hours I was recording. 2 different videos I have to redo now. It was really my fault. If I wasn't rushing, if I wasn't being like a silly goose, that wouldn't have happened. And I also attribute it to the fact that I didn't put my little eye crystals. This is my signature. I don't know if anyone's noticed. It's my signature. And it's crucial to my recording process. If I missed one step in the setup, everything's like messed up forever. Just like this tracking that I forgot to put on my face. But you know what? It gave me time to regroup. I made like an actual outline based on what I said in the first video. So, you know, this is just par for the course. I think this is like initiation to be like a real full-fledged YouTuber. I don't think any like major YouTuber hasn't had a time where like something went wrong in their whole recording session. So I'm okay. I'm fine. As I always say, it's a new day, a new sleigh, and a new video where I have something to say. So I actually read this book a really long time ago. I mean, not a really long, it was a few months ago. I read it because I got the newest released from this author, and I was like, might as well read the first book that they came out with before I get into that one. And then I read it and I was like, interesting. I didn't make the video when I finished it because I thought I'd wait, because if you may or may not know, there is a new series coming to Netflix, at least in the US. It's already been released in the UK. There is going to be a series based off of this book. I don't know if it's going to be the full series, but at least this first book, and it's coming to Netflix in the US August 1st. So I thought it would be fun to review the book before it came out and kind of see how my opinions change based on, you know, like after the series actually premieres. So without further ado, the next book that we're going to be talking about is A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. As a Midwesterner, trying to say the title of that book is actually the bane of my existence, because the Midwestern accent is dropping the end of all the words. But like you can really hear it when I try to say the title, because I say like, but like I don't say the D. So like if I say it really fast, it sounds like a good girl guy. So I'm gonna just get ahead of it before the comments do, because if I see this in the comments, I'm gonna laugh with you because it is funny that I can't speak, but I'm also gonna be a little sad. Anyway, as a spoiler-free summary, A Good Girl's Guide to Murder is a murder mystery in the YA genre, starring our main character, Pippa Fitz-Amobi, which I will say is like one of the more unique names I've ever read in like a YA book. Oh, this review is gonna suck with all the P's. I apologize in advance. I have a pop filter, and her name is Pip. So we're going to be really putting this thing to work. Pippa, aka Pip for short, is a senior in high school, and for her senior capstone project, she's decided that she is going to cover the entirety of a case that took over her local town, that being the disappearance/alleged murder of Andy Bell. Andy Bell was another student that went to her school, and one night she suddenly disappears. So when Andy went missing 5 years ago, there was a police investigation that led them to one suspect, that being her boyfriend at the time, Sal Singh. Into the investigation, they quickly started to suspect Sal of having something to do with her disappearance and alleged murder. But before they can question him, they have found that he's committed sewer slide in the woods. So for all intents and purposes, this case is wrapped up. They have their one suspect that they presume is guilty, Andy, who they presume is dead, and they've just accepted it as the town, the family, like everyone has unanimously agreed that Sal was guilty and he probably killed her and hid her body, and they'll just never find it. Now, 5 years later, Pip decides that she is going to look more into this investigation and see if she can find out what actually happened to Andy Bell. So the book follows Pip as she teams up with the brother of Sal Singh, that being Ravi, and together they uncover all the hidden mysteries of their local town. So that was it for the spoiler-free section. Going forward, we will be getting into spoilers, and for a murder mystery, you're going to want to avoid those. If you don't want to find out what actually happened or any of the details, evidence, all that good stuff, click off this video. There's not going to be a safe point to come back to this at any point. So if you actually want to find out, don't don't keep watching. Just read it, come back, and then we'll talk about it. Otherwise, if you don't care and or if you've already read the book, please feel free to continue. I will also mention now a trigger warning for the following topics. Going forward, we will also be talking about themes of SA, and in general, if topics of murder and blood and things of that nature make you uncomfortable, please feel free to click off this video now. So with that out of the way, let's get into it. So what separates A Good Girl's Guide to Murder from other murder mysteries in this genre is its specific correlations with true crime. Now, true crime, if you don't know, is a genre of entertainment, which to me is like crazy to even call it entertainment, but it's entertainment, in which people, usually content creators, will go over famous cases, specifically ones of like spectacle or things that really caught the public eye at the time. Some examples being like Ted Bundy, John Wayne Gacy, Jeffrey Dahmer, and people of that nature. True crime content creators will usually do deep dives into these cases, compiling evidence, interviews, suspects, and all these visuals and graphics. But there's something to be said about the content creators that are continuously making money off of the stories and traumas of these people over and over again, especially because there are some content creators that will go through all the evidence because they themselves believe that they are able to solve a case that was previously unsolvable by all the police and detectives involved. There's a certain track record when it comes to especially these true crime cases of, law enforcement not being the most helpful in the nicest way. And, having a distrust in the police and their capabilities is not unique to true crimers, so I can understand why. But the reasoning that so many people believe police and law enforcement to be incompetent when it comes to these things is systemic. And I think we can also say that them with their government resources can be incompetent, and you with your podcast mic can also be incompetent when it comes to solving a literal legal case with real people. So this specific thought process of someone being more capable than police to solve a literal investigation is the basis of A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. Typically, with a lot of books in the murder mystery genre, you'll find that our protagonists are drawn or motivated to solve this particular case is because they're somehow involved in it. Usually they're like the suspect or someone they love is the suspect, and it's very isolated. Like they solve that one case, but that doesn't mean that they go on to be their town's detective or like an actual, true crimer. This story is different. Pip is not involved in this case at all. She was like, I don't know, like a preteen when it happened. She very distantly knew Sal, and she cites that a lot of her motivation is because she like kind of knew him, or at least like had some interactions with him. And she thought that he was too nice to have been accused of all those crimes. And honestly, it's just chalked up to like curiosity and just being like, what if I could solve a murder that this whole town already thinks is solved, but it's really not. So her reasons are very true crimey, I want to say. But I want to specifically focus on something that I outlined when talking about like true crime, specifically people that are content creators or people that consume that kind of content, and a general consensus for a lot of these like older cases. And I will go into that once my battery is changed. I just finished talking for 40 minutes and I forgot to press record on my camera this time. This is just the video that goes wrong, I guess. Continuing on from what I was trying to say and what I had been saying for 40 minutes. The reason I bring up true crime is that I wanted to specifically tie in a specific aspect of it, that being the distrust and incompetency of law enforcement and how it plays into this book specifically. As I mentioned, a lot of people do have distrust in police and law enforcement, and a lot of it is based in systemic oppression. Over the years, generationally, the police haven't necessarily given us a good reason to trust them. For true crime, I think like a really good example, and again, I'm not like super well versed in this because I don't consume that kind of content. In the case of Ted Bundy, if I'm remembering correctly, I think that he was able to escape a lot of like police custody and investigations because he was seen as charming and handsome. That's why they had Zac Efron play him in the movie. It's a prime example of a lot of the distrust that people have, especially true crimers have, in the police and law enforcement. Now, A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, which I already said is very heavily inspired by true crime, takes this and adds a new dimension to it. and one I've been alluding to this entire video, which is based in racism. A crucial part of A Good Girl's Guide to Murder is that Sal Singh, our alleged murderer in this case, is brown. He's an Indian man. Andy Bell, the victim in this case, is white. Our narrator, Pip, tells us pretty explicitly that a big reason that she thinks the police wrapped up this case so quickly was because of their own racism and bias. It was easier for them to condemn and scapegoat Sal because he was brown. Because really, when you looked at the evidence and the alibis that they had, and you kind of like squinted your eyes a little bit, it looked like maybe Sal was the actual murderer in this case. But despite not having any other really concrete evidence and the fact that Sal died, allegedly by sewer slide, might I say, they were really quick to wrap up the case and say, you know what, we have our guy, but he's dead, we can't question him. Oh well, case closed. The police did not look into any other suspects, evidence, leads, or anything because they were so convinced they had their guy. And this aspect of racism is very explicit, but it's also very much in the subtext of the entire book. This is also examined a lot later in the book when we meet Ravi, Sal's brother, for the first time. We find out that Ravi actually much earlier on, before the story even takes place, tried doing his own investigation to find out if Sal was actually guilty. But he encountered a lot of obstacles along the way. And again, a lot of those obstacles can be attributed to the fact that a lot of the people in their town believe Sal is the murderer. So they're not too keen on talking to the brother of said murderer about the case in which he is the suspected murderer of. But the subtext in this conversation is that the reason Ravi is also facing obstacles in his own investigation is because he's brown, whereas Pip is white. Because let me tell you, Pip gets a lot of different interviews and phone calls with people that I have to imagine she just walks into a room and she's like, let me talk to your CEO. And they're like, oh, wow, okay, sure, go on up. This exact dynamic is also examined much later in the book, where Pip literally breaks into their house. So at one point during the book, Pip is like, we need to break into the Bell house because we need to find that real hard evidence. And Ravi says it like really on the nose, but I was kind of laughing because Ravi essentially tells her, he's like, you want me to go into this neighborhood of all white people and inconspicuously go up to a random house and try to break in all before 12 p.m. No. No. Because the subtext in that conversation is that Ravi would seem out of place and suspicious in an all-white neighborhood. And more than likely, the people that actually live in that neighborhood would more than likely call the police the minute he showed up. Whereas Pip, she blends in. She is also white. She's also a woman. So people wouldn't necessarily suspect her of doing anything wrong compared to Ravi. There's also another instance. And again, another reason that I was like really vibing with the book at first is because there's a lot of like subtext. Not all of it is super on the nose. And this was very much evident in this specific scene I'm going to talk about. So as a result of the accusations that were brought against Sal, Ravi's family hasn't had a normal life for the past 5 years. They can't even go grocery shopping in their same town because they get a lot of like negative attention whenever they do. So at one point in the book, Ravi actually goes to the store. I think he's getting like milk or something, but he's just grabbing something quick, in and out, all that good stuff. He runs into Pip while he's there, and she notices that when he's trying to check out, the cashier is like really not being friendly to him. I think it was even like she didn't want to touch him. Like she was like, put the money on the counter. I don't want to touch you. So Pip stands up for him and really calls out the cashier and is like, he's a normal person. He's like everyone else. Don't treat him differently. So Ravi has a confrontation with her where he is essentially like, I don't need you to stick up for me. I can handle my own battles. Like I've been going through this for the past 5 years. Like I'm fine. It's also layered with the fact that like she's 17 and he's 20. So he's like, I definitely don't need you to like save me from anything. But the subtext in this conversation is that she feels that she has to save him because she's white and he's brown, and that this interaction is very heavily laced with racism. So all things considered, there's like a really great examination of race where our main character is confronted on, again, this is not like conscious, but very subconscious white savior complex that she has to really confront when she's going into this case. Because when I was first reading it, and I didn't get to this scene, I was like, it kind of feels white savory that she's like, I'm the one that's gonna absolve this man of his alleged crimes and clear his name. So the fact that they confronted this in the story was like top tier for me. I was like, okay, I'm liking where this is going. And for me, it just added like a whole new dimension and layer to the murder mystery genre, especially with the fact that this is really interlaced with true crime. It adds another level to the reason why Pip and all the other people involved in this story are so mistrusting of the police. So I had that going for me. I liked the mystery, I liked the storytelling, and I will say the audiobook for A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, chef's kiss of audiobooks. It's one of my favorite audiobook listens of this year, I'm gonna bravely say. So the production value on the audiobook is like, oh my god, spectacular. But like, so I was vibing with it. I was really like into it. And then it fell apart. Everything just went to shit. Towards like the real like meat of the story, like the middle to end portions where Pip is actually uncovering real stuff. The minute she's actually challenged, confronted about her morals and values and even her original motivation for doing all of this, which is to clear Sal's name, she folds. So I'm going to backtrack a little bit. The reason that the police really heavily suspected Sal was because originally he had an alibi the night Andy disappeared. He was at a party with 4 of his friends, including a girl named Naomi and this dude named Max. Originally, his 4 friends corroborated that he was at that party till midnight, which cleared him for Andy's abduction and / murder. But then later on into the investigation, these 4 friends came forward to the police and said, Sal asked us to lie for him. He actually wasn't at the party at 12, he left at 10. So that was what forced the police to initially look harder into him as a suspect. But we then find out that these 4 friends actually lied. So Naomi, Max, and those 2 other friends that I mentioned were in a separate incident on New Year's Eve where they were driving home from this party drunk under the influence. They swerved off the road and hit a man that was walking on the sidewalk, left him, so a hit and run, they left him for dead, and they just went about their lives. They just kind of moved forward. They found out that the man was paralyzed for life, and they just simultaneously agreed that they were going to keep it a secret. Then, after Andy went missing and into the investigation, they all got an anonymous text telling them, hey, I'm going to go to the police and tell them what you did, unless you say that Sal actually wasn't at the party at 12. So, to cover for themselves, they rescinded their statement. They rescinded Sal's alibi. Pip finds this out. It's a very tearful confession from Naomi because Naomi is sisters with Pip's best friend, Kara. So Pip finds this out. She finds real hard evidence that Sal was not guilty. She can now go to the police, bring forward the evidence, reopen the Andy Bell case, which was, again, her initial motivation to find the actual person that was guilty in all of this. And what does our protagonist do? Not that, I'll tell you that. Kara, her best friend, cries to her and says, Pippa, don't take my sister away. Don't take her from me. Don't turn her into the police, please. And Pip agrees. We're supposed to feel bad for Naomi because Naomi has anxiety. She's going through it. And to me, that sounds like the equivalent of when influencers and other people on the internet say like, hey, I'm sorry, I was going through depression and that's why I called you a slur. I'll tell you, as someone that has both depression and anxiety, I have never once felt motivated to call someone a slur or lie to police and cover up a hit and run. The reason that this bothers me is because we had this whole buildup where we were getting an excellent examination of racism, police bias, all this good stuff. And then the minute that a white person is actually guilty of something, we sweep it under the rug. Just to reiterate, these people, Naomi included, are guilty of a hit and run, obstruction of justice, falsifying evidence. I'm going to argue vehicular manslaughter. They could have killed that dude. Driving under the influence, amongst a myriad of things. And these are things they're actually guilty of, and there's actual proof of them doing it. Sal, on the other hand, was not guilty of anything. He was never guilty of anything, nor was his family. And yet for the past 5 years, even in death, he's been called a murderer, and his family can't even shop in the same town because they face such criticism, such like aggression from the townspeople for something they didn't even do, and for something their son didn't even do. And yet, Naomi and the other people involved in this incident have been able to walk free this whole time. Not to mention that Sal was their friend, and they took away his innocence. They took away his alibi. And I get it. I'm supposed to feel bad because Kara and Ravi are supposed to be mirrors of each other. Ravi wasn't guilty of anything. His brother was an alleged murderer. Kara's not guilty of anything. Her sister is literally not alleged. This is not alleged. She actually did this. An accomplice to a hit and run, driving under the influence, obstruction of justice, and falsifying evidence. And we're supposed to feel bad and want to like root for Kara and Naomi because we don't want Kara to suffer the same things that Ravi and his family have had to suffer. And that's why we're supposed to be okay with this decision. I'm not. And I hate to say this and bring this up to all the people that are like, me, we're supposed to feel bad. It's not that big of a deal. It is. First of all, if Naomi went to prison, she would probably get community service. She would probably never see the inside of a jail cell. Let's be honest. 1. 2, I doubt that the town would have the same reaction to Naomi's family. Like, I don't think that they would be chastised in the same way that Ravi's family was. And C, most importantly, Naomi didn't ruin just one family's life. She ruined 2. And again, I understand this is fictional, but just for the hypothetical, she left a man paralyzed for life. I can't imagine the medical debt that he had to go through because of this incident, not to mention the lives of his family and how everything has changed for them. One family. The Singh family, Sal's family, again, can't even go shopping in the same town. Probably haven't been able to properly grieve their son because everyone thinks he's a murderer. That's 2 families' lives she ruined so that she could walk free. That doesn't sit right with me at all. Like, literally not at all. Especially the fact that as a character, Pip's whole motivation was to clear Sal's name. She was supposed to be doing all of this for Sal. And then the minute she can, the minute that she has every opportunity to clear his name and reopen this case, she doesn't. This is supposed to be a good girl's guide to murder. She's supposed to be a good girl. She's supposed to have a moral compass and a sense of justice. Where's the justice here, Pip? And it really made me so angry because her and Ravi had like a whole argument about it because he was like, oh my God, yeah, we can clear my brother. Let's do it. And she's like, about that? Why don't we just like wait to find other evidence so that I can make sure that my friends who are literally felons can get away with it? No, get out of here. Literally leave. What? The fact that Kara felt comfortable asking this of Pip to literally help cover up a crime, an attempted murder, B, that Pip felt comfortable accepting this, and C, that she feels comfortable allowing Sal to stay guilty for a little bit longer just so that she can find any other evidence that doesn't have anything to do with Naomi. Literally criminal. It's so awful. I hated that part. Now, Pip does get a little mini redemption, and I take this redemption with a grain of salt because when we find out that it's actually Mr. Ward, aka Naomi and Kara's dad, that killed what's her face? Andy. She doesn't hesitate. She calls the police, and yeah, she does have a minute where she's like, you have to tell me why you did this and everything. Give me the explanation so I can tell your daughters because you're about to leave them. I'll give her that. She actually did what she was supposed to, which is turn over evidence to the police. I don't applaud a fish for swimming, but fine. But then I can't even like let her have that little victory because it's not actually Mr. Ward. So we find out eventually. At this point, the police think that Mr. Ward is their guy. They've like reopened the case and closed it again, this time with Mr. Ward as the guilty party. But then Pip is looking over her murder board and she's like, wait a minute. This doesn't look right. She instead decides to go over to the Bell residence one last time, this time to talk to Andy's sister, Becca Bell. So earlier on in the book, it's very heavily alluded to that at some of the old parties during like Andy's time, there were incidents of drug use and specifically the use of roofies. So we find out that Becca, Andy's sister, was a victim of SA at one of these parties after someone roofied her. We also find out that Andy, again this was earlier in the book, we found out Andy was a drug dealer and she was the one that sold the Rohypnol to the person that SA'd Becca. When Becca found out, she wanted to confront her sister and tell her about it. This happened to be the same night that Andy disappeared. The timeline of that night is that Andy went over to Mr. Ward's house. They had a bit of an altercation and an incident. She hit her head on the side of his desk, was bleeding out, and she decided to go back home. When she went back home, Becca confronted her and said, "Hey, you sold Rohypnol to the person that assaulted me." She was hoping for like a tearful apology from Andy, or that they were just gonna have a sisterly moment. And she didn't get the reaction she was hoping for. I can't remember if Becca pushed her, but at some point Andy falls to the ground and presumably she has a seizure or something, but she is dying and Becca is looking at her sister and she doesn't call the police, she doesn't call an ambulance, she just watches as her sister dies. So tentatively, she is the murderer of Andy Bell. Again, even though she didn't do it necessarily, it was her inaction that killed Andy. After Andy died, Becca put her body in their family's septic tank and that's where she's been all these years. So upon hearing all this evidence, hearing the confession, everything that's happened, can you take a guess as to what Pip did with this information? She says, "Becca, run away. Go to Mexico. Go somewhere. Just go before the police catches you. Go run. I'll destroy the evidence."
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Now, again, this is another instance where we are forced to see this character in a holistic perspective. We get their sad, tragic backstory, TM, and therefore we're supposed to feel bad for them for committing literal crimes. And I want to make it abundantly clear that yes, Becca did go through a trauma. She did not deserve anything that happened to her. What she went through was objectively horrible, and that person deserved to be in jail. But two things can be true at the same time. Becca is a victim that deserves justice, and she also deserves to be brought to justice for her own crimes. Which I'm gonna say that just because she didn't call the police or anything, and just because she hid Andy's body, I don't think they would necessarily convict her of murder. It would probably be manslaughter. So I'm not saying lock her up for life, but there should be some justice here, especially again with the fact that Sal has been guilty of a crime he didn't commit and has been forced to deal with the consequences where he can't even rest in peace because, as we find out, Sal was murdered this whole time. He didn't commit suicide. He was murdered. He had to go without justice for all these years. He had to be condemned as a murderer, and all these people got to walk free. I don't think it's fair that all these people that had something to do with his suffering as well as the suffering of his family, we're supposed to sympathize for. We're supposed to be "Oh, I see your tragic backstory, and therefore I think you are absolved of all these crimes. I think you should evade justice." It just cheapens the whole examination that we just had into racism and how it plays into police bias and how it impacts investigations, especially with true crime. I hate to remind everyone because this shouldn't be something we forget, but the person we're supposed to feel bad for is Sal, is Ravi, is the whole Singh family, the people that have needlessly been suffering this whole time. We can feel bad for what happened to these people, Naomi and Becca and Kara. We can feel bad, but we can also simultaneously understand that they need to be brought to justice. It just bothers me, especially because throughout a lot of the story, as Pip is uncovering more and more evidence, she has moments where she's "Damn, it really looks like Sal. Gosh, buddy, how oh no, you look so guilty right now. What if I just stopped the investigation and condemn you as the murderer with everyone else? It'd be so easy. I'd get an A on the project." It just cheapens the whole experience for me because I felt like we were making some really good commentary, really good headway at the beginning of the story. And then again, anytime that Pip is confronted with her own ideals and morals, values, and ideas of what justice is, she folds because those people are they have sad backstories. They have trauma, and therefore I'm supposed to feel bad that they committed actual crimes. And again, I'm not going to be so bold as to say that I think that this was done intentionally or this is malicious in any way, but I think like reading this book as a person of color myself, I have so much more sympathy, especially like picking up on all those subtexts at the beginning, that it feels like almost a betrayal once you get towards the end and Pip like just can't stick to her morals and values. This book feels very white saviory, very virtue signaling, very much like I'm woke. I'm not like those other white people. I don't see color. And I don't want to discourage white authors from including like aspects of race and racism into their books because, again, as I mentioned, at the beginning of this book, it's not done bad. It's done very well. There's a lot of like things that are said like very in the subtext. It's not super explicit in a lot of ways, and it was done very well. But then it just goes to shit. So overall, it really fell flat for me, and I hated the way that this book went. I would have loved it if it didn't just turn out the way it did. Especially because we're supposed to feel bad for Becca and believe like, oh yeah, she didn't mean to do it, like, she's not actually guilty. But then she actually tries to kill Pip too. I'm not gonna lie, when that happened, I was like, and that's what you get. That's what you get for trying to let a murderer escape to another country. I'm so sad because there was so many other aspects of the book that I was okay with. And I found like a lot of people criticizing this book for. Like people were like, oh, it's too easy. She uncovers everything like super easy. There's no resistance. People just tell her everything she needs to know. And for me, I'm like, I don't really like giving those kind of criticisms because it's also a murder mystery. They're gonna solve the case. Like that's just a given. Expecting any kind of realism from a murder mystery to me is always like, come on. A lot of people were also super upset that they killed the dog in the book. Like so many 1-star reviews I saw on Goodreads literally only cited the dog. I personally don't have a pet. I had a hamster once and I was sad when that happened too, but people were livid that she did this. And I was over here like being mad at like the racism and virtue signaling and all that when I read those reviews, a part of me was like, the vibe was kind of like, I can excuse racism, but I draw that line at killing the dog. And I'm over here like, you can excuse racism? Which I'm just kidding. Like, obviously, I'm not saying that those people didn't like recognize the same things I'm recognizing. It was just like interesting to me that like the main reason that these people were giving bad reviews was the dog. Like that was their like, I'm dropping the book. I'm not finishing it. This crossed the line, which yeah, valid. I mean, how dare you? But also I'm just like, whoa. Anyway, with that being said, this is the end of the video. I have closed out this video 2 other times now. I have to believe that this is divine intervention trying to censor me and censor my voice, but I won't let you. I think I'm tentatively gonna have to give this book a 1 out of 5. And I already hear what people are gonna say. They're gonna be like, blah, 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 blah. Why do you base everything on race? It's not that big of a deal. The book was still good. Meh, meh, meh. And to that I say, get your own YouTube channel and make that video then if you want to. I'll be waiting. Because even though in this video I did talk more about racism and how it has to do with true crime and the execution with this book, there were some other things that I didn't necessarily like. Part of it is just that it was very like Pretty Little Liars-esque, where Andy was essentially Allison. I mean, both have an A name, by the way. I also hated the age gap between Ravi and Pip. Like, I would have loved if the book ended with them just having a friendship, but the fact that they end up like in a relationship just sits so awfully with me. He's 20 years old and she's 17. That's a grown man in college. It feels so weird to me. I hate that. There were times, like, especially with all the evidence, that it felt a little chaotic, especially like from my perspective as a reviewer, where I'm like taking notes so that I can make a video about it. I was like constantly having to put it down to write something down. And in general, because I have by now finished the reappearance of Rachel Price, and just as a writer, Holly Jackson just makes things very like boom, boom, boom in terms of action. Like, there is never a filler chapter, there's never a dull moment. Everything is important, and that's just her style as a writer. So it can occasionally feel a little overwhelming. Even in her recent release, I still felt the same way, that there was times where it was a bit much. But what I talked about in this video was definitely the determining factor in my rating, especially because it's definitely not just like a personal thing. It also compromises the morals, values, and motivations of our main character. If the one thing I know about you is that you're solving this crime to clear a man's name and that you're a good girl, and you convince me of none of those things, I don't know how I'm supposed to really connect with you as a character. But anyway, feel free to follow Holly Jackson on social media. As I mentioned, this is getting turned into a Netflix series that's coming out August 1st. So I will extend the benefit of the doubt that in this adaptation, they might have taken some changes and they might have approached this a little bit differently. And again, I just finished the reappearance of Rachel Price, video coming soon, and I felt like a lot of these things were completely different, especially because that book is from the opposite perspective, that being the family member of someone that is involved in a true crime case. But you will hear more about all of that when I cover the reappearance of Rachel Price. That is her most recent release. It came out April of this year, I believe. So feel free to go check that out if you want to like prepare ahead of my video. I don't know when it's coming out, but it's coming. Be sure to follow me on all my social media at Variations of Listen to Kristen on Instagram. That's a hair in my mouth, sorry. TikTok and Twitter now. Okay, my battery is dying, so we're just gonna make this quick, and I'm tired and hungry. Thank you so much for watching. Please remember to subscribe, like the video, leave me a comment, let me know what you think, and as always, I will see you in the next video. Thank you so much. I'm tired. This was a lot to go through in the span of like a week.